Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and a warm welcome to our participants from the various corners of the world who's connecting with us again. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us for the third webinar entitled Education, Learning and Capacity Building in Our Digital Age. It is my immense pleasure and honor to introduce to you Feraye Ozfescioglu, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the World Humanitarian Forum, and Mr. Evariste Karambizi, who is the Director of the Division for Peace and Rule of Law of the United Nations Institute for Training and Research.
Thank
Feraye.
you. Thank you for the introductions, Jon-Hans, and thank you for the moderation today to start with. I stated quite a few times in different occasions, but would like to reiterate here, especially in times of crisis, we should always remember we are all in this together. As World Humanitarian Forum, our mission is needed and relevant as ever. It has been 2 months since the launch of World Humanitarian Forum's digital series, and we have already started featuring the leading figures of the humanitarian aid and international development community who have inspired us in these challenging times. Francesco Rocca, Yasmin Sharif, Right Honorable Douglas Alexander are to name a few. We are moving towards a new social structure. We need to consider our way forward. Periods of disruption like this are often windows of opportunity to change and call for the development of innovative solutions to adapt to a new environment. As we shape the future for a better tomorrow, we look to people, companies, and organizations that have an eye to the future and a shared mission of bridging the inequality gap and leaving no one behind. Hence, I'm today very proud to announce the partnership of World Humanitarian Forum with UNITAR on WHF Learning as part of WHF Digital Series. Digital learning is not only a tool for some, but more is the tool that enables inclusivity and access. Thank you, UNITAR, for this great start of collaboration, and we look forward to shaping the future for a better tomorrow together with you. And here I would like to pass the word to Evariste Karambizi from UNITAR.
Thank you very much. I would like to echo what you just said, especially in these times of crisis. We should always remember one fact. We need to navigate together to reach the other side of the COVID-19. This is why the United Nations Institute of Training and Research, UNITAR, a dedicated capacity building arm of the United Nations system, has partnered with the World Humanitarian Forum. The mandate of UNITAR is to develop individuals and institution capacities for the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development through outcome-based training and learning initiatives. Driven by this mission, we design and deliver a wide range of innovative learning solutions in different formats, with a particular focus on digital learning and education to meet the most actual needs of communities in the quarantine, and the post-pandemic world. The United Nations Institute of Training and Research, UNITAR, and WHF partnership will offer you the opportunity to follow a number of free online courses developed by the Division of Peace and focusing on a variety of cross-cutting topics: conflicts, peace and security, youth, gender, stress and well-being, and many others. UNITAR look forward to our value-creating partnership with the WHF. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Evariste. Thank you very much, Feraye. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's get starting to really dig in to the importance of our subject today, and that is education, learning, and capacity building in our digital age. To thrive in a rapidly evolving, technology-mediated world in flux, learners must not only possess strong skills in areas such as mathematics and science, but they must also be adept at skills such as critical thinking, problem solving, persistence, collaboration, and most importantly, curiosity. All too often, learners in many countries are not attaining these skills, nor, tragically, they do not have access to education. The World Humanitarian Forum and the United Nations Institute for Training and Research are collaborating in offering you a series of webinars with the aim to discuss, to explore, and to examine these pressing issues of access to education and the skills gap, and also to explore ways to address these, and in doing so, contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals, but more importantly and crucially important, to ensure no one is left behind. It is my immense pleasure to introduce our panel, and I would like to start by introducing So-Young Kang. She is the founder and CEO of Nobi, the first mobile, first learn by doing platform that reteaches how you teach and empower. No, I did not make it. It wasn't a slip of the tongue. And you will hear the magic that So-Young's enterprise and this platform offers. She is the author of the Huffington blogger. She's a renowned TEDx speaker, Harvard Business School grad, former McKinsey consultant, and she was nominated by the World Economic Forum as a young global leader. The list is extremely long of the different think tanks and different associations for whom she provides guidance. It is really a pleasure to have you on our panel today, So-Young. Thank you. My next guest is Magda Resende Ferro from Portugal. Bom dia, Magda. She's been working with the internationalization of higher education for the last 10 years, setting up the international office at the Universidade Católica Portuguesa in Porto. She currently works as an internationalization manager and strategy development. Her main focus is on managing quality internationalization of higher education to ensure access for all. She has recently published a book entitled Internationalization of Higher Education Institution, a Managerial Approach, where she develops a management model for internationalization. Her main topics of research are management of internationalization and internationalization of home institutions and processes. Really nice to have you on the panel as well, Magda. Our next guest is Dr. Yannick Du Pont. He is founder and director of Spark. Yannick has been working in the field of higher education and economic development in several post-conflict countries since 1994. With an MA in International Relations and Sociology from the University of Amsterdam, Yannick worked for the Netherlands Ministry of Development Cooperation from 1996 to 1997, later with the Dutch PACS and the development think tank of the Dutch Labour Party, the Event Vermeer Foundation. Yannick was also engaged as researcher for the Netherlands Institute of International Relations, known as Klingendal, and he taught courses at the University of Amsterdam. To conclude, next to his day job, Yannick also serves on the board of the Max van der Stoel Foundation in Amsterdam. He's a member of the advisory board of the Center of Theory and Change in New York and the Little Bits Foundation in The Hague. Yannick, het is een groot plezier om je hier te houden. It's an enormous pleasure to have you on the panel today.
Thank you.
And then my colleague from Barcelona, Daniel Rajmil, he is from the Universitat Oberta de Catalunya. He is a professor in international relations and the director of the MA program run in partnership with UNITAR in conflict, peace and security. Daniel has done his MA in Middle Eastern Studies. He is a lecturer at the UOC School of Law and Political Science, an associate teacher at the Political Sciences faculty of the University Pompeu Fabra. Daniel's research focus emphasizes in the Middle East, international economics and international diplomatic strategies. He is also a short-term electoral observer for the Spanish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Ladies and gentlemen, I am sure that you are eager to hear what our panelists have to share with us. So without any delay, So Young, you have the floor for your opening statement, please.
Thank you so much, Jon-Hans. And it's really a privilege to really be here with all of the rest of the panelists with WHF and also with UNITAR. I'm going to just share, just a few thoughts around this whole topic of digital learning, technology, applied learning, and moving from learning to action. I think there's, a lot of myths out there around this whole space of digital learning. And the myths range from, and so I'm going to maybe do a little bit of myth busting and then to share. And then I really invite others to share questions and we can kind of explore this further. So one myth is everything has to be face-to-face. You cannot develop skills without being face-to-face. So that is a very, very big myth that, I love face-to-face. I miss humans. I love humans. I love giving hugs. And when you are face-to-face, you're able to problem solve and engage with each other in a really powerful way. So so I'm not saying that face-to-face is not important. However, the idea of skill building, of curiosity, critical thinking, these skills and these 21st century skills absolutely can be trained and developed using digital platforms. Part of why Nobi was founded, it stands for Grow Knowledge into Being, was all about taking the knowledge from your head by doing things and applying them, and then to make that part of your being, through skills development, whether it's project work, whether it's design thinking, critical thinking. So that's myth number one, that training and skills must be face-to-face. I literally debate people every day who tell me, no, I'm forced to do some digital things, but I have to go back to face-to-face because that's the only way to teach. I think I want to break that myth, and I think my fellow panelists, I'm sure, will agree as well. Technology is here, I think, to enhance the human experience, not necessarily to replace. You still need humans who are designing, who are thinking about the experience. So that's myth number one. Myth number two, you can't do, mobile microlearning is the newest trend, which I think many of us acknowledge. But in mobile microlearning is only for simple stuff. I'm not going to do any serious learning in mobile microlearning. I'm going to use long form e-learning or face-to-face, because that's the only way to do serious learning. I want to break down that myth because the truth is complicated topics and complex thoughts and ideas are difficult to consume. And in some ways, the best way to consume complex, difficult content is to break it up into bite-sized pieces to make them digestible and understandable. So there is actually a lot of research out there that shows by breaking down content into micro pieces, it increases the effectiveness and the retention level of that content. And so there's a lot of research that, and in fact, all of us have been practicing micro-learning for a long time. In the business world, we call it top-down communication. We take the essence and the summary of things and we have to synthesize them into what really matters. And in order to do that synthesis and micro-learning requires a lot of critical thinking skills. I think many of us will know that to write a little summary, one-page summary is much more difficult sometimes than writing a 1,000-word essay, right? Because there's a lot of wasted words there, right? But in order to do that summary, we have to be super sharp, super clear to help focus on the key points. That's myth number 2. I think that myth number 3 is that digital content creation is difficult. It's time consuming, it's expensive, and it's time consuming. And so I want to break that myth as well, because that's one of the biggest bottlenecks to digitization is and agility in organizations is the time and effort it takes to digitize content. I want to share that it can be easy. It can be simple. You can have an 8-year-old child. One of my favorite stories is, people always ask, how long does it take to digitize content in Adobe? And I say, well, if you're 8 years old, about 15 minutes, actually less than 15 minutes. I'll give you my hand phone over dinner to an 8-year-old child, and that child will play around and no training, will swipe because they have curiosity. They'll play around with it and they'll create something. I think when you're 40 or 50, it might take half an hour. So I think the big difference in terms of training time is 1 or 2 minutes or half an hour. Yeah, but the idea that anyone can create, and I'm a firm believer in the democratization and the inclusiveness of not just a few people who are the special experts, but the democratization of and sharing of knowledge. And then we use digital technologies and tools and designed in a way to be inclusive to people who may not have access, and also people who can create on their own, so that they can also self-generate, which we all have something to share. And so those are my 3 myths. I'm going to stop there. I think Jon-Hans told us maximum 5 minutes, so I think I may have exceeded. So I'm going to stop now, and I would love to learn from the rest of the panelists.
Thank you so much, So Young. So Magda, if we can turn to you, please, and ask you for your opening statements, please.
So thank you, Jon-Hans, and thank you, So Young, because I'm going to build on So Young ideas or myths. I also am a firm believer of digitization, and I believe that maybe we should all thank COVID for giving us the opportunity to stop and think about what we are doing as higher education institutions. And as Jon-Hans has said, I do my research in internationalization, and I love to think of internationalization as of universities and higher education institutions as a win-win approach. So it only makes sense if everybody wins. So everything that So Young was saying about the myths, COVID has given us the chance, because I know we say it in Portugal that the need is the mother of all inventions. And so with COVID, people could not turn their backs for digitization anymore. So all these times, because I've been listening about this, we all have heard about MOOCs in 2012, more or less. And so it's been, every once in a while, people bring this up to the discussion. But at least in my experience, what happens is, well, we have no money, as So Young was saying, we have no money and no resources, and we have other priorities. And then COVID came, made us all stay still, and everyone turned into digitization. So thank you, COVID, for that. I know it's not, you won't be hearing me say this in any other context, but I thank COVID for that, for bringing us the time to think, first of all, about what we were doing and how we were doing it. And did it make sense to still do it at this point in time? Because most higher education institutions, and I'm sure that Daniel will tell me otherwise, will tell us otherwise, but most higher education institutions haven't changed much since the 15th century. They still hold up to, you know, those classes, people, there's someone back there talking and everyone else listening, like I hope people are doing right now with me. So so with COVID, so we stopped, we thought, and we said, okay, so we have no other option. So let's turn to digitization. And so choices were made, money was spent, investments were made. And I believe, so I really believe that at this moment, we are living a disruptive moment in time with higher education institutions, with other institutions as well, but mainly other higher education institutions. And one thing I found very interesting is that when I went to, you know, face-to-face international conferences, there were some challenges that most people were debating regarding internationalization. And two of those challenges were, one, environmental footprint. And two, how can we, minimize the gap between people who can afford internationalization opportunities at their own universities and those who can't afford, because internationalization ended up being a process that led some people out. I mean, it was just increasing the gap in educational opportunities. Then COVID came, and I really got optimistic because, first of all, now we can reach many more people without, you know, being face-to-face and having to stand long hours queuing in airports and then unpleasant plane trips with delays and you know what all, for just being 1 hour in a meeting together. Really, sometimes I think, how can in the world that made sense at any point in my life? Right now it's easier. I'm in Porto, very comfortable at my house, and you're around Europe, the world. And I mean, we can all reach out to people. We are not polluting. We are not spending money to our institutions, and we are still getting to meet the people out there. And I'm still comfortable. I have no jet lag. And in my mind, I think, how come it was so normal to me to spend the whole day on airports and airplanes to meet with people for 1 hour? So I think that some things will not go back because it was just plain stupid what we were doing. And we realize that now because we had the time to think about that. And the other thing about global outreach is that, you know, when we think about internationalization, higher education, there's always, like, I'm not saying an elite, but as So Young was saying, it's like, again, there's a gap in opportunities. And with digitization, and maybe with the right partnerships and cooperation, because again, I believe that win-win relations are the ones that we should pursue and are the ones that really care, that really are worth working for. So I believe that higher education institutions will be able to reach more people, and especially people that without this media, without this without technology, would never be able to afford premium education. So I would like to conclude with a question that I'm asking myself for many times now, and maybe afterwards we can discuss, is this is the time to really think about the role of higher education institutions. What is the role? It's not the same as it used to be. We are not a marble castle in the skies. And I think that we should enhance our relationship with our surrounding community. So I don't know how many time I spent. I'm usually very concise. I hope I've been concise. And I'm giving the floor to, I think it's Yannick, but back to you, Jon-Hans.
Thank you so much, Magda. Yannick, I would, love to ask you to do your opening comments, but at the same time, if I could ask you to attempt to answer the question that Magda, just posed, because the work that your organization do is in a way challenging these ivory castles, and that education is only delivered in certain environments, and you've proved the contrary with huge success. So it's over to you, Yannick.
Well, thank you, Jon-Hans, and it's wonderful to be part of this panel here today, discussing this extremely urgent and topical issue of online education, blended learning, the future of higher education and access to education. Yeah, it's true. I mean, maybe just to introduce myself, I'm CEO of Spark, and we work in 17 fragile, conflict-affected states to provide access to higher education for refugees, for vulnerable populations. So, for example, here in the Middle East, I'm now calling actually from Turkey, from Istanbul, where we also have a large operation. We're supporting 10,000 refugees in a scholarship at a higher education institution in the region. So this has really, I think, positively, but also negatively, of course, but also positively affected our work in the sense that we see a tremendous shift that also has been described by the speakers before me. So I'll come to that in a moment and answer that question. Now, when I was preparing for this, I just thought about like time, and this happens, I think, when you're on lockdown at home. And I thought, you know, when I was 7, we had the first home computer, IBM. I remember it was 1982, a long time ago. Then we had the first web browser. That's 1994. I think people were kidding at that time about email. I remember at the university, people wouldn't see that was very important. Then by 1997, people were starting to put money into stocks, and so did I with some of my first earnings, which I all lost in the wipeout of the dot-com bust in 2000. And then we all thought again, was this just a dream, right? Was this really so important? I think we have our answer today, or the last 2 months. I think that what we've been seeing is, I mean, what humanity would probably on its own would still take another 10, 20 years, COVID just accomplished in 2 months. And I saw somewhere that Google said that they saw a growth happening in a time frame of 1 month that they predicted for the next 2 years. So you see a massive, I think, coming home of what we already in the back of our mind knew that was happening, and suddenly it is here. Now that means, I think, to come to your question, I think that means for higher education institutions that if you haven't yet fully gotten onto this bandwagon of blended learning, online education, at least to complement your offline regular education, you better start running, because if you don't come on board, I think you will become irrelevant, and I think you will basically be taken out in the next couple of years' time. I really think this is a very disruptive moment. In our work concretely, to give you some examples of why I also think it's very feasible, is that here in Turkey, where I'm now sitting, a lot of state universities were not really busy with online, but they have been rushing, also supported now by the Higher Education Council, to move online. And we just completely reprogrammed our interventions to just offline education, to quite substantial investments with the EU, not just in buying server space and equipment for universities to move online, but also training the professors. We had a lot of older professors now suddenly all registering massively for these online training programs that we're running with Turkish universities, because they want to start teaching online. Their students are now demanding it. They're not asking, they're demanding it. The state is now promoting it. Then we had people saying, yeah, but what about the excluded? So we did a poll amongst our refugee population, and 71% is reporting it has good hardware and Wi-Fi access to follow Zoom classes. You know? So the other 29% we're making available with universities and with some donations, hardware and Wi-Fi connectivity. We'll fix that. So I think that suddenly obstacles that were before projected to be really obstacles to online and blended education suddenly are becoming minor hurdles that we need to tackle in the forthcoming time, because otherwise we may not be any more relevant. And I think that's that's really coming home very hard with us. I think it also really offers great opportunity, and I say that from a point of view of access to education. It is, of course, a threat maybe to some of the established university business models to charge high-end fees and to have dormitories where you make some money on the side, or some catering, or some, I mean, if you look at the whole financing model of these systems, students will have a lot more choice. They can choose online, they can register for online accredited courses. You will get a lot of more international competition, in my view. And probably the cost per unit will drop. So that would mean, in my prediction, that we would have to look far more at becoming excellent as higher education providers. We have to be fully online, and we need to offer even higher quality for a lower price to a larger audience, to a larger number of students. That, of course, if that is indeed going to happen, and that's a prediction that I just made today, let's see, that does mean great opportunity for excluded and refugees, because if the cost for education is dropping, which was one of the main obstacles in our scholarship program, where we spent $5,000 a head a year to educate a refugee at the university here in the region. If we can get it online, we can probably drop that cost to a fraction of that. And that means we can educate far more students. So I also see this actually as a major opportunity, as leveling the playing field to draw in more excluded, more refugees in higher education. And finally, and maybe I'll just stop there because I think I'm overshooting my time already, overshot it. I think this is also going to be the kick in the butt of a lot of governments that have been talking about regulating and about should we allow online education and how do we do the accreditation. I think it is happening. Private providers are doing it, also here in countries in the Middle East. Now, if the public system will not come on board, the users and the clients will find other alternatives, making the public system irrelevant over time. So I think this is also the push we will need to get these systems to change and become what they're meant to do. That's to facilitate and support this instead of, just questioning if they should be allowing it. Over to you, Jon-Hans.
Thank you so much, Yannick. You know, trust the Dutch to tell it as it is. Thank you very much. Yannick, I think, you know, that is really the purpose of this panel discussion and this webinar, is to really have an honest, sincere, direct discussion about so many of these challenges. And thank you very much for your valuable contribution. Daniel, so you are representing one of the largest private universities, and you are a professor in a number of these very serious academic disciplines. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Jon-Hans, for the introductions. Thank you as well, UNITAR and you, for moderating, and of course to the World Humanitarian Forum for organizing this space to debate. It has been a pleasure to be the last, because I have catch different ideas, no, from the different speakers, no. So Jon, Magda, and Yannick, has been a pleasure to listen to you, and I hope I'm going to add a few other points of view that could complement our debate, which is basically the goal that we have gathered together here in order to see and to think of possible ways to how we could better shape this digital future of education. So let me briefly introduce myself. As Jon-Hans has said, I'm an international relations professor here in Barcelona at Universitat Oberta de Catalunya at the Law and Political Science faculty. Universitat Oberta de Catalunya is an innovative online university. This year has been our 25th birthday, so we have been fully online for 25 years, and therefore we have been used to work in an online environment. We have about 70,000 students studying at the UOC, and we have students that are studying in 134 countries. Therefore, UOC, it's one of the biggest universities in Spain. And the first point, I like the idea that So Young has made. I don't know if I'm challenging the myth, but I would try to make different points. And one point that I'm very happy with UOC, and indeed all higher education organizations, has done, it's that the UOC has embraced and has adopted the United Nations Agenda 2030 for the Sustainable Development Goals as a strategy. And this is something that I want to make a reminder for us as well as higher education institutions, that I think that despite COVID pandemic, it should be not forgotten that those goals, 2030 goals, they were agreed and adopted much before than this pandemic began. Because I think that now when we are thinking and trying to imagine this future, we should not try to forget that those goals, they were there before, and we should not diminish them. And this is very important, that this is something that we should keep in mind. Rather than thinking of new goals in relation of education, trying to adapt this commitment to quality education, not just access to education, to think on how to go to the online world, but just how to bring in this online world this higher education of quality, quality education. This is something that I wanted to point out, and something that I want to stress out on my first 5 minutes to spark the debate and conversation. Then I want to say that on the personal level, as you said, I'm directing this master in conflict, peace, and security studies, and therefore I want to also bring to the floor the fact that we are used to work with students that they come from countries which they are facing conflict, wars, disasters, a lot of challenging situations, where this COVID pandemic now it's adding an extra challenge to these existing already challenging situations. Therefore, I think that COVID situation, as Magda was sharing as well, has reinforced as well this convincement, as I was saying, on the SDG goals, and those ones that from this micro level, at least in my case with this master program, we are trying to embrace and to promote. In this case, it's probably SDG, gender and equality, try to think about energy. But basically, at the end of the day, what we are really encouraging and we are trying to make more obvious than ever is SDG 16, how to promote justice, and those institutions and education as a way to promote and advance in these goals of the SDG 2030 goals, which is going to be and make a better and sustainable society. In our master, we collaborate as well with UNITAR in this sense, because we know and we promote conflict and conflict studies and peace studies, because we know that education has proven to be a very effective tool for conflict transformation and conflict prevention in conflict zones. Here we could think, for example, about restorative justice and other tools, which at the end of the day, they could serve, and we could learn from this pandemic in order to embrace and try to push for this education for everyone, education of quality, and try to promote all these SDG 2030 goals to change society and try to promote and prevent further conflict, where this COVID situation could actually be a situation that could that could provoke and escalate those conflict situations. On the other hand, I think I also agree with Yannick, the explanation that he was giving, because on the other hand, we cannot complete our mission if we do not consider this bidirectional communication that we have to have with our students, and also like the academia, university, and students. We still need to enforce this working together hand by hand as a collaborative partnership with our students. And therefore, I think it's very important, in our case, we have been on a long run on the online programs. We have to think about this new reality and try to learn from our students as well. And this is going to be the case to succeed, to bring in these programs on students that they are learning from situations where COVID has affected a lot of their conditions. And therefore, how to bring all these existing programs, how to adapt them, and how to complement the traditional online programs that we are offering with new short programs that probably they will have to run all year, not just on the traditional recruitment programs on summer semester or winter semester or autumn semester, and try to make it long year running these programs in order to complement. And as I said, we have to start thinking how we could adapt our programs to this situation and these students. No? And this is where, and just to start to begin this debate, is I ask myself, no, how are we going to bring, or how are we going to close this gap between globalization and those students that they were already studying, no, in these conflict situations, and that they were experiencing this isolation, no, probably due to this conflict. We are seeing, no, nowadays around the world, for example, in the Middle East, cases where despite the COVID situation, we have youth population that are going back to the streets and demanding, no, and they are keeping their demands to get access to education, to health systems, and this it should be kept on mind. So just to finish, I would say that I think I see that in our case we are seeing a shift of paradigm from traditional online learning to new complementary forms of learning that are going to be based in all year, running all year, into different short-time programs, for example, webinars as this one, or MOOCs, no, trying to implement different platforms to the existing online learning programs. And therefore, I'm open to discuss, because basically one of the dilemmas that we will find, and I was seeing as well our guests, they were saying, how we can talk, no? This is a reflection I asked myself. How can we promote this online learning where we have this population and these students that they come from conflict areas and rural areas where this digital transformation has not been done yet? So this is something that I want to ask to myself. We are thinking of different ways, but there's a long time, there's a long path to try to get until we get to this point. So I'm going back to you, Jon-Hans, and thank you for having me here and open to discussion.
Thank you so much, Daniel. So Young, Yannick, Magda, thank you also for your contribution. So the question that I want to ask you is, so all of you spoke about the difference and the challenges between traditional higher education. Yannick spoke very much about adult education in refugee settings, so high risk situations. So Young spoke about the whole notion around very effectively dismissing some of the myths around quality online learning. When we look at the accreditation standards that exist, one of the problems that we face in this digital age is the lack of validation and accreditation of online programs. Secondly, and attached to that, is most higher education institutions focus on a very specific target audience, which is the young school leaver that is now wanting to pursue higher education, and not necessarily the adult that is involved in adult learning and lifelong learning as we define it. But more importantly, the lack of accreditation or validation of microcredits. And so Young, if I can start with you, how does your organization then challenge and deliver with these constraints that exists in higher education today?
It's a great question, and I loved, I think, even what Daniel was saying, and there's a few questions here that I want to connect, but I think we heard this a lot from, because we work with higher education, we work with polytechnics, we work with close to probably 90% of the institutes of higher learning in Singapore, but also with universities in the US and different countries, in Brazil and in Spain as well. So what we found is that we kept getting this challenge of how do I shift. It's not just about moving content online. So people were saying, how do I take my PowerPoint and upload it? Can I upload PowerPoint to your digital platform? And we said, technically, yes, but why would you do that? So the idea of taking PowerPoint PDF and just smushing it into a digital platform is absolutely not really digitizing content. You may as well just email it. So in order to truly digitize, you have to reimagine the content. So it requires a mindset shift. So we kept hitting this barrier. So we worked with academic experts around the world, deans, the former president and dean of IMD in Switzerland. We worked with Professor John Kim from Harvard Business School, a tech professor, the former dean of NTU Business School. And we said, we want to create this accreditation program to teach mobile instructional design. And now you can imagine that teaching for the e-learning MOOC generation is very different when you assume the learner is sitting down at their desk with a big laptop versus assuming that if you're in a refugee camp, if you're in a war-torn area, you don't have a laptop. But 5 billion people have, I think my phone is here. Yeah, mobile phones, 5 billion, yeah? And that's more than the number of people who have access to clean water. So if I'm going to design for this screen versus designing for this screen, I have to think differently. So we launched this mobile instructional design accreditation program, and it's been remarkable to see the number of adult educators and learners who are participating. We have teachers, and I'm very proud to say that the first few people who got accredited or who are getting accredited, they're in their 50s. They're not the millennials. They're in their, because they're in their 50s. They have 20, 30 years of experience teaching and training in the traditional way. And they are pioneering and looking for a new mindset in order to rethink, reimagine content for a different format. And for this very experiential, group-based, social learning experience, you got to think of it different. It's about storytelling now. It's not taking a bunch of PowerPoint slides and popping it into a technology platform. And I get the silliest questions. So I think the idea of reimagining that content and then accrediting, because I think you're absolutely right, Jon-Hans, it's really about accrediting and providing skills and capabilities, defining what they are. So we've actually had thousands of people kind of come through and and learn about this whole mobile instructional design accreditation. We need to raise the standard and we need to raise the bar, and we cannot assume that with COVID, you put a Zoom camera, that's digitization of content. It's not. Putting your class on Zoom is not digitization of your content. It's basically just replacing what Magda said of the teacher and the student. You just replace that teacher face-to-face with a Zoom camera. But it's not really redefining and imagining and taking advantage of what technology has to offer to create much greater engagement.
Thank you so much, So Young. Yannick, if I could, one of the questions that we got from the participants is they fascinated by the work that your association's delivering, and they ask, how is it possible during moments of insecurity and increased conflict and violence? How do you protect your learners, and how do you ensure the successful outcome of your program?
That's a very good question. I think the first thing I think we're doing right, there's two things we're doing right now, concretely. And the first relates to another question I saw popping on the screen, I think from Nigeria, saying, what about hardware and access that also So Young was referring to? And I'm not trying to play down the fact that there is a problem. We work in places like Libya or Somalia or Yemen, and it is a major issue. However, electricity was a major issue when it was first introduced, but then boom, it came really quickly. And with all the 5G networks now being rolled out, 4G mobile technology, also having mobile smartphones now for $50 on the market here in Turkey, that would allow you to even follow this webinar. I think the price of this technology is dropping, it's accelerating, and it will reach these places. And so I think for now, what we're doing to make sure that everybody's included, we've reached out to our scholarship students, and we're trying to provide where we can, even home delivery, cheap tablets and Wi-Fi dongles, for example. So there's access so that everybody can access the education. Then on the psychosocial front, we have actually launched now online counseling So we did this offline. We had psychosocial counseling for refugee students, one-to-one, in counseling centers. That was ongoing until before COVID. Now these counselors have moved online. So we're now scheduling basically private, secure connections between the refugee student and the counselor, so they can continue to get this counseling. And we actually increased this. I think we're now scheduling hundreds, I think over 1,000 students can now access this, I think, in the coming months, amongst the 10,000 we're serving. So yeah, that's definitely also something to keep in mind. It's also not, and I think that's what I liked about what also So Young is saying. I think it's not about, and this is now a big discussion we're having also with counselors, are you then going to do it in the same way, or is also the use of technology changing the way that you're going to do this? I think that is a very exciting path where I think where the initiative, what So Young is leading, I think is far beyond the technological grip on this that we are as Spark. And that's where we would like to learn also from, not just keep doing what you're doing, but now in front of a camera, but how do you then change the way of doing business and serving your students?
Thank you so much. And my last question goes to Magda. Magda, the challenge that we face is we see a lot of the authorities are saying, great, online learning is really the future. But when we look at the reality of which programs are actually accredited and validated are the traditional face-to-face programs, and that the online programs falls into the bracket of non-recognized or executive programs. How do you think once we see the dark clouds of COVID dissipating, is that the opportunity you are talking about? Or do you think there needs to be more of a global cohesive debate so that authorities can see there is a groundswell of opportunity in order to validate and to recognize online learning more so than it is today?
Thank you, Jon-Hans. Well, that question will probably get from me a very unpolitical correct answer, because in my opinion, what is happening right now is that the agencies that accredit the academic programs are still, as I used to say, they are still in the 20th century or in the 19th century. So, and I believe that COVID, by giving us, I mean, there's no other way to go, might be that small window of chance we need in order to get these degrees accredited. But I believe that in my experience, what happens is that unless there is pressure, there is, first of all, an understanding from higher education institutions about the importance of transforming what they do. Again, it's about stop and think what you are doing and why you are doing this. And then they must be the one that train people working on accreditation agencies in order for them to do their job. Because right now, what these agencies are saying is that they don't know how to accredit online programs. And again, this part is where I will probably say something that shouldn't be on YouTube, is that, well, if you don't know, you should learn. So you should learn from people who know what they're doing. It's not like, and this is why, again, I think COVID is a great opportunity for us all, because it just stopped us from being able to function as we were used to function before. And sometimes this is the only way to make people get out of their comfort zone, get out there and change. Because if you don't need to change, most people will never do it. And the only reason why we are having this conversation right now is because there was COVID. As Daniel was saying, I think was Daniel, I'm not sure, Daniel or Yannick, I'm sorry if I'm, so we fast forward 2 years in 1 month, right? Why? Because we had to. And if we have to, we will manage to do it. If we can still hang on with, you know, just dribbling like, okay, we adapt. So if accreditation agencies don't allow us to offer accredited degree programs, we go for executive programs. And you know, you just dribble, but you don't confront the problem. And the problem is, so the reality right now is what's happening right here in this Zoom area, is that this is not the future, is the present. And if institutions cannot adapt to the present, well, I will leave food for thought on this. If you can't adapt to the present reality, maybe this is not the place for you to live. But
Magda, thank you very much. As I always say to Yannick, frank, honest, sincere talk about the real challenges that we are facing, why, you know, honesty such as what you express is most welcome. We have 5 minutes left, so I'm going to ask each of you please 1 minute to wrap up, and I'm going to start with Daniel. Daniel, if I can please ask you to give us your concluding comment, but please 1 minute.
Okay, I will try to now sum it up. I think that the discussion has been very interesting in the sense that it was very interesting to see all these people that are involved in digital education and how are we all trying to do the best and trying to improve what we are willing with, that is education for everyone and education of quality. I would say how to keep this quality of education and how to reach these populations that are facing conflicts, no? And then probably this internet connection can just be done through mobiles. This would be one of the best answers that we should find everyone on its own aspects. Thank you for having me here. It has been a pleasure to join your discussion.
Thank you, Daniel. Yannick?
Sorry, I'm muted. Well, I think, you know, for me, it's very clear we're living in a very disruptive moment. This was a build-up. It doesn't come from nowhere. This has been building for decades. And now it just went in warp speed. I think the real challenge is to help those very renowned offline institutions with deep knowledge, help them to change, to become, to move online, but to stay relevant. Because I think really my fear is that if they miss this boat, they will be irrelevant quite soon. And this would be a great loss. There's one. Second point, this is the moment to equalize access for the vulnerable and for refugees, you know. No, it was not feasible to bring them all physically to Harvard, you know, to study. It is more feasible to invest in access to 4 5G access and small tablets, and then provide low-cost, high-quality education online. And I think this can be a massive opportunity for getting access to education wider.
Thank you so much, Yannick. So Yang?
Sure. I think, I love the conversation and I love the directness, and I would say that, I totally agree that now is the time, and we have to change our mindsets. And the best way to do it is just to start to try. It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be beautiful. And this idea that perfection is the enemy of good, right? Of just getting started. And I think in the academic world, we're so used to things being perfect, 20 years, or what we perceive to be perfect. And I think now getting started, trying things out, trying new technologies, downloading them, going ahead and getting your hands dirty. You won't get it right the first time, and it's totally okay. It's totally okay. And then challenging yourself to reimagine that content for a mobile first experience to provide accessibility, offline accessibility. The technology exists, right? So it's getting mobile content
accessible, teaching people how to think about it, right? And really helping enable to work, whether you're working with refugees in Syria, to South Africa, to those who have no Wi-Fi. Let's create these kind of solutions and collaborate, and let's just get started. You know, I think I get tired of, I'm on so many of these webinars and I have the same questions and I'm like, have you downloaded the app? Have you tried it? No. What have you tried? Oh, I'm attending webinars every week. Stop attending webinars. Go try something. So that's my key message.
Thank you so much, So Young. Magda?
Well, thank you, So Young. I really love that last line. So, and again, in line with So Young, I think that, so our biggest challenge is to go back to the way we were, because COVID will get to a stop, hopefully, and I think we all believe in this. And I think that as higher education institution, our biggest challenge is to waste this opportunity. This was an opportunity that we had to rethink everything because reality has changed. And if we miss the opportunity, and as So Young was saying, most people will start assisting webinars and do nothing. No, get out of your couch. Think of what you want to do. What do you want your role to be? How can you be relevant? How can you be relevant when everything you need to know is here? How can you be relevant as an higher education institution? And again, and I end just with one thing. So we have this opportunity. We can either take it or leave things the same. But the choice is ours. The opportunity was given to us. The choice is yours to make.
Thank you so much, So Young, Yannick, Magda, and Daniel. Thank you for your continued commitment in enabling and driving inclusive education. Education, or the transmission, the acquisition, creation, adaptation of information, knowledge, skills, and values is a key lever for sustainable development and personal development. This is based on a vision of inclusive societies in which citizens have equitable opportunities to access effective and relevant learning throughout life, delivered through multiple formal, non-formal, and informal settings. As such, education is essential to individuals' development, as it is to the development of their families, of their local or national communities to which they belong, or in Yannick's case, where they are being hosted, as to the world at large, as a fundamental human right enshrined in a number of international normative frameworks and built into most national legislation. The right to education is to be seen as an enabling right for the realization of other economic, social, or cultural rights, as well as a catalyst for positive societal change, social justice, and peace, while leaving no one behind. Let's, So Young, Magda, Yannick, and Daniel, let us join hands together with UNITAR and with the World Humanitarian Forum, and let's embrace this challenge. And let's say we get back together in 3 months' time and we have this discussion and we can demonstrate and illustrate what we have achieved, because we want to lock arms, because we want to make a change to ensure no one is left behind. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jon-Hans.
Thank you so much.